Hey there. This is Savannah Cormier with Local 3999, Bath Marine Draftsmen's Association in Maine. And I'd like to take a moment to talk about Bayard Rustin, who was kind of the backbone of a lot of the American Civil Rights Movement. He was integral to the entirety of it, and for the majority of his life, he fought for equality and peace. And he was constantly fighting for things. And it wasn't even, he'd fight for everything. In fact, one of his sayings was, or basically, politics was where you found yourself, right? And because he found himself in prison at one point when he refused to serve in World War II, he used that location to engage in political mobilization and agitation within. He wanted to desegregate in the prison itself, and so he would do that. And unfortunately, most people are unaware of this, of Bayard Rustin. So why is that? Well, how is his acts so forgotten, for the great things he did? He brought Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence to America. He was influenced by his mentor, A.J. Must, but he really enacted it. And all of a sudden, everyone was asking, hey, we need Rustin. And he was the organizer of the famous 1963 March in Washington. He was in the position of the advisor and teacher of a young Martin Luther King. And yet a large amount of all of his acts are erased from history. And it's because Bayard Rustin was a homosexual. And during a time when it wasn't okay to be a homosexual, if you said anything, you were arrested. Hey, guess what? He was arrested for sodomy. He was oftentimes, they tried to use that against him in order to not have him more involved. They would say, well, I'm gonna out you. And so he had to take a minor role, a less public role, but he was still influencing people around him. And that's how he helped Martin Luther King in basically all peaceful negotiations. He was also invited, Mahatma Gandhi invited him to partake in a sit-in 1949. Well, unfortunately, Mahatma Gandhi was killed in 1948. And initially, they weren't going to proceed with that sit-in. And Mahatma Gandhi's son, he was like, hey, no, come on. And so Rustin was there in India in 1949, sitting there. He was international peacekeeper. Before we had globalization, before we had that, Rustin was there. And he did bus sit-ins before Rosa Parks. He was a proponent. He was the guy. And unfortunately, because he wasn't afraid of his sexuality, his grandmother said, well, if that's who you are, that's who you are, basically. So he never felt the need to hide himself until it was years before it took him to realize, oh, this isn't good. I'm influencing things in a wrong way. But there's more information that you can find about him. I would highly recommend The Lost Prophet. It's a book, The Lost Prophet, written by acclaimed historian John D'Amelio, who compiled more than a decade of archival research and interviews with dozens of surviving friends and colleagues of Rustin's. Rustin himself also had a book that he wrote before he died, Time on Two Crosses, the collected writings of Bayard Rustin. And I'm just strengthened by him, by his resolve. He was just, there's his saying, one has to fight for justice for all. If I do not fight bigotry wherever it is, bigotry is thereby strengthened. And to the degree that it is strengthened, it will thereby have the power to turn on me. And I think we can all resonate with that. Thanks.